Right, we're from the East Greenbush Central School District Board of Education meeting. We already performed the Pledge of Allegiance. Student council will be at the next. Will be presented at another time. So we're going to move on to approval of the draft minutes. Jennifer Michelle was not here during that meeting. Is there any questions or comments about those draft minutes? Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Turner, is there a second? Mr. Bruno, all in favor? Everyone's in favor, motion passes. And we're going to do a motion to amend the minutes for December 15th, 2024.
Yes, just to clarify what this item is about. At the meeting of December 18th, the board approved recommendation for a pilot agreement related to CPE Greenbush LLC solar project. Minutes inaccurately reflected that the revenue that would be yielded to the district was 18 million per year. It's actually 18,000 per year. And that was what was discussed.
I tried.
Got the attention of the town board, but they were approving a similar agreement. So we were notified. We were getting, we researched it quickly and we clarified. Just an accuracy in the minutes. Thank you for correcting.
Mr. Mann and Mr. Mann and Ms. Steinbach was not at that meeting. Is there any questions or comments on? And what I didn't do, so talking about the other draft minutes, I didn't get the abstentions. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. So looking at the resolution to amend the minutes for the December 18th. And is there a motion to approve? Ms. Gursky, a second. Ms. Turner, all in favor? Any abstentions? Mr. Mann, Ms. Steinbach. This approves. Okay, moving on to the board forum. I'll start on my right with Ms. Steinbach.
I'm okay right now. Thank you.
Ms. Phillips.
I just want to say that we're all thinking of Claire Mancini's family. And it's been amazing to see the support from the community. Not at all surprising, just how quickly you all mobilized. I'm thinking of that family very much.
I was gonna say the same thing, Sam. I know we both live in that zone. So yeah, it's been great to see the support from the community, from all different businesses, students, parents. So we're thinking of Claire and her family.
I did want to extend an apology to Mr. Dan Wagner. A couple weeks back, might have been a month or so, about the field trips. I have to be very careful how I communicate about items. My intention was not to try to implicate as if, so for context, we're talking about international field trips and hosting academic opportunities for kids in the district. Some of my questions centered on, the ethics around it, like I'm a prior auditor. So my lens automatically goes to professional skepticism in a lens. The lens that I was trying to communicate is about protecting teachers from a potential ethical violation as a district. I totally support, right, our educators, how our kids enrich their academic experience. I did, I wanted you to be present, and I wanted to sit there, directly to you. It definitely was my take. I craft my best work here for students and teachers, but just and moving on to the public forum. Residents, students, employees, and business representatives of the East Greenbush Central School District may address the board on matters concerning programs and/or operations of the district, other than matters involving personnel. Members of the board do not directly respond to citizen concerns during the public forum. If a response is appropriate, either the president or superintendent will contact the individual in the near future. Those persons wishing to address the board will be recognized by the chair of the meeting and should state for the record their name and address or affiliation with the district or business. While the board does not wish to infringe upon free speech protections, it must be stressed that the visitors forum is not deemed to be an open forum. The board president will conduct the forum for the orderly and efficient operation of board business. In addition, any remarks which may be considered defamatory or stigmatizing are prohibited and will be declared out of order. All comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Any questions or comments? All right, so we'll move on. I do want to publicly welcome our Quest Star team, which we'll be talking to. I want to make sure it's not the exact next item. Of course, it's the exact next item. But we have Mr. Dan Sherman, Dr. Cruz, and Mr. Jeff Baker. Mr. Buno was having our superintendent search, so to Mr. Buno.
So because the Questar team is here, I reserve my just an update for the committee for this part of it. So obviously the team is here. Met with them a little earlier in the executive session to talk about the search as well as our survey results. We want to thank the committee for almost 1,200 responses to the survey. One of the biggest responses I understand for the Questar search team has seen. We do anticipate, if the board has an opportunity to review the survey in more detail, to have a copy posted in the near future for the community to see. There will be anything that requires a redaction that's indicative of a private individual. We will address those things. We hope to advertise at several free and digital print kind of media for the search, so it'll be very widespread in terms of the advertising. And we anticipate being able to do that as soon as tomorrow, so that we have a 30-day posting period, which would bring it to the end of February. And it will provide Dr. Cruz all the materials for the search for review, and then all those materials will be shared with the full board. The Board of Education will be the ones who review the applications. We'll be doing the interview process and selection and final appointment recommendations. And we anticipate those interviews to take place in March and April. Of course, applicant candidate pool dependent. So that's kind of a summary of where we are. And then we do want to welcome Jeff Baker from the team to come forward and present the executive summary of the report. Dr. Cruz and Dan Sherman are going to join with Jeff if we want to compile that. And we may be from Jeff because he was here last time. Put the service together. So welcome, and Dr. Cruz, and come on up.
Thank you, Mike, and the members of the board. I just want to add before I get started that this the document was certainly a team effort. Dr. Cruz caught some very important issues there, and that we've addressed. And Dan was also very helpful in collating a number of pieces of data that are in the full report. So publicly thank everyone for all of their efforts. So to get started, we're just going to be talking about the executive summary here in public session. So a quick review, as Mr. Buno mentioned, there was a total of 1,195 responses to the survey. So almost 1,200 members of your committee and staff responded to this. The survey itself was posted on the district's website back on December 19th for a number of weeks. I think it closed on January 10th. Excuse me. So the results of the survey in terms of your basic demographics are as follows. The highest number of respondents were members of the East Greenbush community that identified themselves as being parents with a child or children in school. And you had 67% of your population of parents who responded to the survey. Followed after the number of parents, the next largest group were your instructional staff members here at East Greenbush. They represented about 15.9% of respondents. Next highest group following your instructional staff were your community members that do not have children attending East Greenbush. That was at 8.95%, so almost 9% of community members, followed by non-instructional staff, which represented 5.75% of the survey, and then finally you had almost 2% of the respondents were your students that attend here at East Greenbush. So that was question one, giving a basic demographic breakdown of who the folks were that filled out the survey. Next question, we asked those people who did respond to select up to 3 different past positions that your ideal candidate would have that would be most valuable. Top 3 responses of those were assistant superintendent at 22.5%, building principal at almost 21%, and followed by a superintendent at 19%. Question 3, we then asked residents to place weight on specific professional experiences and skills that the respondents felt would be critically important or above average, or rate them in terms of levels of importance. There were 12 different categories that we listed in the survey. We have the top 10 of those in the executive summary. I won't go through each of those individually, but just to give you a flavor there. The number 1 was advocacy for all students, ranked as the highest, the most important, critically and above average at 93%. Then you had innovative problem-solving skills was directly below that at number 2, also in the 90% range. You then had, following that for the last 7, were possessing strong track record of instructional leadership, personnel management, school budget came in at number 5 at about 84%, commitment to student college and career readiness, desire to become a member of the East Greenbush community. And then finally, the last one was understanding the importance of technology in the classroom at 68%, rated as critically important or above average. So that was the professional skills section. The 4th question, we asked individuals to weigh the importance of personal characteristics. And so we have the top 10 listed there in the executive summary. The most highest ranked one was of characteristics were honest, ethical, high level of integrity. 98.6% of respondents indicated that as a critically or above average important characteristic you want to see in your next superintendent. Following that was open-minded or being able to take input in a constructive way. Number 3 was strong communicator. 4 was confident, has the ability to make tough decisions. 5 is someone who's committed to the position in the community. 6 is passionate for public education. And then followed down number 10. The last one was positive and upbeat. Turning to question number 5 on the survey. This is where we began with the open-ended questions. So question number 5, we asked respondents to identify any other characteristics that they would like to see in a superintendent. What happened there is that we received 399 comments. Those comments were then arranged by topics and then ordered in terms of the number of responses per category. The top category of those 399 respondents was candidate attribute, followed by leadership, and then the last grouping was student and parent focused. Question 6 talked about asked residents to identify what the greatest need for the school district will be in the next 1 to 3 years. As was done for the question number 5, the comments were also organized group by topic without any editing or formatting, and then those groupings were then counted in terms of which categories had the largest number of responses. So this one had garnered 615 comments, which is the largest of the open-ended questions. Top needs here were focused on curriculum, programs, student outcomes, that sort of category. Second was questions related to or needs involving staff and staffing. And the third highest was leadership. Question 7 asked community members to provide a question that they would want the board to themselves to ask candidates. We received 453 questions based upon our ask. Again, as before, organized in group by topic. We have the top 5 categories in this situation. This question rather was vision, questions related to vision, leadership, and goals, experience and candidacy. Other questions were related to staff. The 4th highest group was safety and culture, and then the 5th being students. Finally, our last survey question asked respondents if there was anything else they want the board to know, and we received 242 comments on that, given that lead-in. So the responses here again were organized and grouped. The highest category here in terms of the number of responses was leadership. that essentially is the summary of the survey as a whole. If there's any questions. I know you all have a full copy of the report, which you'll be reviewing and making movement on once you've had an ample time to look that over.
I got a question. So, and just for the sake of the public, so it sounds like we had the majority of our responses to be parents and staff. Like, what was the staff number and the parents number?
Sure. So the parent number, the actual count was 806 parents responded to the survey, which again equated to 67.45% of the overall survey respondents. Then from the 806 parents, you had 109 instructional staff members, followed by then also you had 69 non-instructional staff members. So you had about, let's say, a little over 250 staff total of East Greenbush that filled out the survey.
And Jeff, total staff, we're about 700, 750-ish. So about 33% response rate for staff is pretty decent of a number.
Absolutely, as a general response rate for anything like that, yeah, 33% looked upon pretty favorably.
Awesome.
Do we know if, because we have staff that are also your parents, did we allow, you had to choose one or the other, correct?
Correct. We asked them, we asked individuals what best describes your role.
Oh, yeah.
It could be more if it conflicts, right?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I want to thank the team for putting it together. Working with the board, we worked very closely together to put this survey together. It was important for us to do this because not for a couple of reasons. One, to inform the search process, but also to give us a sense of where the community is at moving forward. Given the attributes that were, or the categories that were, things got grouped by, it's very consistent with what the board has tried to do in its work here through its budget planning and strategic planning processes. And these will not only inform us for the search, but there are opportunities for us to take this survey and to use it for other purposes, because it is a reflection of the community's input, and that's important to us, and it's always been important to us. And I think there are some things to be learned and things that we can grow from, but also inform us for the future. Like the 1 to 3 year period is important going to the budget cycle right now. And as we continue to grow our strategic planning, with the new superintendent coming on, that'll be important for us as well. So I want to thank them again for that feedback.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Have a great night.
All right, nice.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. So we just want to update the board and the community regarding the work that is occurring in construction on the $116 million capital project that was approved last spring. Phase 1A went out to bid on Monday, January 13th. Today, at the Columbia High School Library, we had a pre-bid walk and meeting. We had a number of potential contractors and bidders there, a significant number, both for the roof project as well as for the site work for the tennis court and the basketball court. There are a lot of interested contractors out there in this project. The purpose of that is to just answer their questions and inform them about the scope of the work, clarify any questions that they wanted to ask regarding the bid documents. Some of the contractors, even on a day like this, went up on the roof with James Thomas, and some went out to see the courts. So we had a good turnout for the meeting today. So that is a good sign that people are interested in this project. Bids will be due back to the district offices 3:30 in the afternoon. Will be the bid opening on February 4th. Again, we're hoping that we'll have a number of bidders on both aspects of the project. And we will hopefully be able to review those bids and make recommendations to the board at the February 12th board meeting. It was a well-organized meeting today. Our construction management team and architects did a really nice job explaining the project and the expectations of the district. We were thinking that once spring comes and we're about ready to go forward with construction, we would have one of those meetings. There's not much activity occurring other than accepting the bid space.
Any other questions, comments? So moving on to discussion items and update on universal pre-K. Is this going to be Mr. Simons?
No, it's going to be Mr. Stiles, but the board, I just want to introduce the topic. The board had asked for a review of some of the information in preparation for offering the universal pre-K program next year. I know there are a number of parents, community members interested in timelines, information about what the district status is regarding UPK. Mr. Stiles put together a comprehensive report.
Before you jump in, I know we're going to talk about the advocacy summary a little bit later in the agenda, but I thought what you explained about the funding from the state for UPK was really helpful. And I wondered if you maybe would just do like 30 seconds on that.
Right.
Because I think it really affects the numbers and enrollment.
Very good. Thank you,
Yeah.
So the district receives a large allocation of universal pre-K funding in the state budget. You'll see that later on in Jennifer's review of the state budget. However, the district is limited on what it can spend within that allocation to 5,400 hours per student. Our costs to run our program exceed the 5,400 hours per student, and so the general fund budget picks up the difference. So we have to plan the number of classes that we can offer, considering that for every student, we're only going to receive state support for $5,400. The rest of that money goes into the general fund budget. And so one of the things we're advocating for is to increase that amount per pupil above the 5,400 hours, because that 5,400 hours has been in law for probably 20 years or more. I'm going to turn it over to what?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is it state dollars or federal dollars passed through the state?
State dollars.
So there are a few documents that I have up on the agenda, but the first one I really wanted to go over just gives you an overall sense of the timeline that we are planning on going with this year for a UPK, pending the board, supporting us with that. So in terms of timeline, it's similar to this past year, probably about a week earlier, just the way things worked out. We're going to be a little bit earlier. So we plan on making the UPK applications available to the public on Monday, February 3rd. We will then have the deadline for those applications to be completed by the end of February, so Friday, February 28th. From there, we then will have our lottery on April 2nd. After the lottery, we will inform, the families what their placements based on the lottery results by April 11th, and then give the families a couple of weeks to either accept or decline their location. Again, similar process that we went with last year in terms of timeline with that. On that same document, you'll see our sites that we are anticipating utilizing again this year, the same sites that we are currently utilizing. In terms of the information that we want to make sure goes out to the public, I know there was some talk last year and some feedback just regarding making sure we're as upfront as possible in terms of time, start and end time at each location, because there are some slight differences. We have the meals situation that we're currently still working through in terms of some sites are part of our free meals, some sites are not. And then the before and after care options, as some sites do offer those wraparound services and some do not. So all of that information will be available, prior to, the lottery and registration. We did also create, that is up on the agenda, a frequently asked questions document that we'll make sure is up on the website, and have that out. Just again, those general questions that do come up, that come through my office. We thought it was important to try to be proactive and address those questions.
Can I'm sorry.
Sure.
Do you want questions as we go around?
Perfect.
The contract period for these sites, is it year by year, or was this a multi-year contract for these?
So the contracts are year by year, but the sites that we have already gone out with RFP, we don't need to do an RFP for these sites, but we do renew the contracts every year. They are 1-year contracts.
Are we putting out an RFP to see if any other areas, any other local places are interested, or are we just?
We didn't really have that discussion. It is something that we can do.
Or is any
Yeah,
sense
we're-
interested in taking on another room? I'm just wondering, did we discuss capacity at all?
Yes.
I have,
Capacity is a different issue that we did talk about. We didn't talk about going out for RFP. Some of the existing agencies have capacity to want to add, and we're having conversations about whether or not they would accept the $5,400 per kid, because we're not aware of that.
So-
Right?
yeah, so to address the question, so an RFP to expand to other locations is something that we could discuss and do. But with the current locations that we have, there are some of those locations that would be interested in hosting additional classes, which would allow us to, have more students in the program, pending that they would be able to do it for that current $5,400 per student, unless we were looking to take on more in the general fund, ultimately.
Right, yeah, just to piggyback on that question, in the RFP process, do you recall if there were any other vendors or providers that bid that did not get
There were not.
selected? 'Cause I think we covered, I think based on this, it looks like it's pretty blanketed right now. So, but I wouldn't be opposed to A, if they have additional classroom or two, or B, if there are identified providers, they're willing to take on that. I think it's something to be open to.
I agree. I mean, I
I don't know.
I know that there's another couple, my history, I know that there's other daycare centers, that offer pre-K. I don't know if they would accept it, this rate in the area, but I do think if we're trying to, expand the access here, I don't think if it's minimal work for the district, or if we can take that on, I don't see the harm in saying new year, anybody else interested in taking on our pre-K. If we know we have a wait list every year, and maybe, and I just think like if
We
our,
actually
Yeah, the one thing that I,
on the wait list.
yeah, so the one thing that I would say, on that, so this past year, I think we had about, I want to say it was 197, people enter the lottery, 165 spots, but we currently don't have anyone on the wait list. Anyone, who is not in our pre-K has declined the position,
yeah.
their spot that they have. Doesn't mean that if there was a different location, maybe.
If it was
that
in a
they-
different
that they
location with
would-
wraparound care available, you might be in a different
Correct.
situation.
I would say the only thing to maybe just be a little bit careful of is if we do expand further is making sure that our contracts, we want to make sure that we can fill the class. We wouldn't want to have a site only have 8 students, let's say.
I got a comment too along the lines of expanding, just because I know we as a board had questions also about the oversight and monitoring. And just personally, like I think even working on those pieces, because I think adding would challenge the oversight monitoring of sites piece. And I just want to just know that whatever we do, we're focusing on what we're trying to accomplish, and I don't know if, and I'm just wondering like long-term, goal wise, what does our process for improving or monitoring the quality, the process or the average? I'm just thinking like what kind of, how are we doing with the strategic long-term?
Sure. So a couple of things. So we have not done this in the past, but we do planned on sending out a mid-year and end of the year family survey to all of our members of the UPK to get information from the families. And then also, I am in contact with with the different locations. We have had some internal discussions that we have now expanded to, some more outside sites, is doing some more, formal site visits where we can, do some observations and feel comfortable with everything that's going on there. We know the curriculum is being, that they're using. And then the other piece that we have added for this year, we piloted this last year with a few of our classrooms, and we've expanded it to all of them, is we are giving all of our UPK students the pre-K Renaissance Star Assessment, which will give us a common data point for all of our UPK students, no matter what program they're in, because they are all following the UPK standards, but their curriculum is slightly different. So this will start giving us something earlier to see, because we do that K through 8 currently. So now we're going to bump it down through pre-K through 8, and then just many different uses. I had a meeting a few weeks ago with all the sites. They were actually excited to be part of it. It gives the classroom teachers of the UPK classes information for them at the classroom level, but then at the district level, it also gives us information to be able to see students making growth across.
Right. Can I ask, do we have any concerns on a couple of the sites do not have 6 hours? They're a little less than 6, they're 5. So, I worry about what is that impacting on the academics and social side of that.
The 5 is the minimum, so it is still considered a full day. I haven't had conversations with those sites to see if they would be interested in being able to expand to that additional hour.
I'd like to at least have a conversation, and we should be able to see that tracking through now if we're doing the assessment too. An hour is quite a bit to lose a day.
So, Roy, I know that, this is probably very challenging to predict, especially at UPK level. But is there any way for us to make a guesstimate at the number of eligible children we'll have in the district? Just, as we're looking at being universal, are we expecting this to be stable, to decline, to increase?
So I would say over the last 3 years, I know it has slightly increased each year in terms of the amount in the lottery. Last year, I think I said it was 197. The year before, it might have been 178.
Okay.
So it has slightly gone up. I guess we could see this next year, or 200,
Right.
continue to grow. I mean, typically,
I think you could also use the size of your kindergarten classes.
Right.
That's right. 300 students.
300 students
Right.
is
Right.
right.
And just to add, the 5,400 that were allocated is for up to 259 students.
Roy, I wanted to ask, sorry. I wanted to ask too, I think Jeff mentioned it earlier, but the differences in the lunch I was looking through, and so there's 2 sites where they have the option to pay. One was $3.50 a day, and one was I think $55 per month. So I know you said you're working on that. Other than, I know we talked about previously somehow getting our meals there, which seemed cumbersome. Is there any financial option we have? Is that something that the Education Foundation could consider, or are there other options just to make the UPK more equitable? Because it's very different for those that are attending the other sites. For $55 a month would add up.
Right. We've had some preliminary conversations with Colleen, our food service person, our school lunch manager, and the way the current program, we don't know what the governor's new free lunch throughout program, what the formulas will be to determine that. But when you add, for example, I know you're talking about like TSL and the others, but you add, right now it would not be permissible under the regulation to add them as a site. It is permissible to add Holy Spirit as a site, but when you add the demographics of Holy Spirit into our data, we don't qualify on it. It brings our percentage of the overall enrollment down in terms of the students that would qualify based on income. So adding Holy Spirit under the current formula is not an option because then we wouldn't qualify. So the current program for the lunch program is 3 years with the buildings that are identified. We don't know what the new program is going to, but we don't have the source of funding right now that's permissible to lower the cost with district funds, right?
Yeah, we're taking a look because like TSL would be considered the vending sites. We're looking at what would be permissible. It's not permissible in school lunch account. There could be opportunities in the general fund, but that's something we're still exploring.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of think beyond the privilege program, which seems cumbersome, and we don't want to do something that's then going to infringe on all of the majority of the students in the other buildings. But is there something through the general fund or through a local business or something just to offset the cost? Because we're talking about a small number of students, really.
I was wondering what is the cost for the year, because it's like 18 to 36 students impacted by this. Is there like a total cost like for the year of funding lunch program?
I don't have that information.
So currently right now, it would be 3 classes, 1 class at TSL and then 2 classes at Holy Spirit.
18.
Oh, now someone with 54 students.
54 students
For
currently.
those that want.
I think this, I know that this is an issue that I've brought up, in the past. I just feel like it's very problematic and it doesn't, I have a problem with it. On principle, I don't think we can say we offer free lunch when we actually don't, just like it's not universal pre-K because we have a lottery, it's not. So I think that, our words matter and we have to be careful. And I think it's unfortunate, that it is a lottery system and you could, be put into TSL and you could potentially already not want to put your kid in pre-K rather than keep your kid home for the year. And maybe you're planning to go back to work or whatever and taking on additional costs. It just, I don't know if these situations exist, but, it's real. I think it's really hard, to see this and also say that why is this not language in the contract? That if you want to, take on a classroom or do something that this is also what you're agreeing to. And I think that this is the conversation and decisions we need to make. And we need to watch on how we put things out to bid and what we put in a contract.
I think it's a state problem, to be honest with you. I think that the district has to be careful about absorbing costs associated with the barriers that the state puts in place. And one of the things you'll see on our advocacy point is that the State Council of School Superintendents, which are local advocacy committee that this group is advocating for, is to allow us to use funding to target the kids that need it the most. Okay, instead of the lottery system, so that those kids that may be more need will be able to be prioritized by the district. We're not able to do that right now. To be able to provide comprehensive wraparound services for the kids, to provide childcare, which is very difficult for schools to be able to do right now, even when the parents are paying for it, because there are regulations associated with running programs for 4-year-olds that are different than for school-age children. So the state's got to help us with some of these things because we are struggling with our principle, which is to make it a universal program that everyone would have access to, and that would be equitable across the sites, from the district sites and community-based sites. But the state rules are getting our way, and that it is misleading to say it's universal pre-K because we cannot make it universal without help from the state of New York. So I think the state conversations are going in the right direction, but I would be cautious about, with the resources that are limited in the district, advocating for offsetting that with any further general fund money.
So I think also it's like preparing for, what was in the proposed executive budget, right? We're not going to know until 4/1 if that goes through and it's fully funded. But if it does, do we have a caveat in the contract that if free lunch is available, you must, or
I don't know how that works, but if we don't find out until April and we're preparing for the next year, I don't want to lose out on that option.
I think if funding materializes or regulations become easier, we certainly would provide it. You know, I just think right now there's a lot of unknowns as to whether or not at the end of the day, in states negotiation of the budget, whether or not pre-K children are going to be included in considerations regarding free breakfast and lunch.
Well, I'm just wondering if we could just do some back of that envelope math. So we're talking about 50 students, lunch is $3.50 a day. How much is breakfast per student?
So one of the other things that needs to be looked at, it's not just the cost of the meals that needs to be looked at, it also needs to be looked at the capacity to deliver those.
Oh, okay.
So there's other costs outside of just the cost of the meal that needs to be considered. With the expansion of the community eligibility provision, our meal counts have increased exponentially. There are some stressors that we're going to be talking about, you know, within the food service.
Are you saying like the schools themselves would not, even if you had the
Capacity.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so that's basically
Everybody's-
another component
Okay.
that
Happened during COVID.
it's kind of like the hidden cost of,
Yeah.
you know, okay, right, it's just 55
People
students, you know,
serving
so
enough
maybe
food.
it's not that large of a number, but it's
Preparation.
gonna put some things over the tipping point too that need to be looked at in order to be able to provide a quality food service.
For example, right now, we're studying the impact of the free breakfast and free lunch on staffing needs in our own schools, K through 5. And we're going to be looking at ways to have to increase staffing because the number of kids that are eating has increased. The length of the time that the kids are waiting in line has increased. The need for more, to move the kids quicker, more lunchtime may be needed in terms of, you know, rather than the 20 minutes that's currently offered right now. We're going to have to increase the number of times. You've got more kids coming through the line. So there's a lot of variables that
Pretty
come
much is
from.
free, is what I'm hearing.
It's not free.
Yeah.
But anyways, it doesn't mean that we're not trying. We gotta try.
That sums it up. So that's what, you know, it's just more than just the number of kids and just the cost of those.
Thank you so much.
And the transportation thing, I think we talked about this week. It's a car, is it a car seat thing? It's a.
Well, there's a couple of issues with busing with PK kids. Starts with, do you have enough buses? Do you have enough drivers?
Mhm.
Do you bus those kids separately? We bus them separately from elementary kids because they're operating on a different time schedule. Do you have the time to reutilize those buses, you know, back and forth K-5 kids up, or however you want to stagger the tiers of the bus schedule? There's no transportation aid for 4-year-olds. So it would be non-reimbursable. We get 60-some odd % transportation aid now. Right now, in fact, we're advocating for that too. Transportation aid for pre-K kids. So we would have the option to bus them because if we had the aid, we'd probably figure out how to get them there. And then you have a car seat requirement. Car seat requirement is important. It's not insurmountable in terms of getting those car seats. In my prior district, we had busing for pre-K kids and
And I'm assuming you leave them on the bus, or
car
don't?
seats. And
Like, how does it work? Is there convenience? So,
while you have them on the bus, it's a little bit of time.
Right.
Takes a little while to buckle them all in the seats, but we can do that. It's more of the transportation is not aidable in terms of reimbursement from the state. It'll be all district funds, with the revenue coming back in the budget the following year. Right now,
Did you have a TPK or?
we had both. We had 165 kids that were somewhere.
Is there a way to do something like
Based on
that?
economic demographics.
If you do it through the BOCES, would it be available? Like, I'm not saying you're saying that they have transportation services, but I'm just wondering for that mechanically. Okay.
If you receive transportation aid or it's not possible.
Does the district have access to data? I'd be just curious, like as a sort of steady, you know, probably not for this round of advocacy, but future, just like if you even knew eligible 4-year-olds, and if you could solve for the transportation thing, could they just be absorbed into their catchment schools? Like what sort of that kind of forecast planning could look like?
You could do that, yeah.
You do have
That
that,
would
yeah,
be.
that would be kind of an
difficult.
interesting exercise if, like, if all of this kind of movement and lottery system would still be needed if we could like solve, I think,
You
But
look
we
at the-
still wouldn't have
you
enough.
look at the number of 4-year-olds. that
well,
would
right,
be interested
you'd
in
have to sort of
PK
just
in a
prioritize
particular
what you
attendance
solved
zone.
for and how, yeah.
In a particular attendance zone, you would look, so for
Yeah.
example, in the BPS attendance zone, you would look at children,
Yeah.
4-year-olds, that would be no different than you do with K through 5.
Yeah.
How many buses would that involve?
It would be like to just have that, that great data and even be able to say that, like, you know, the advocacy committee say, this is the ask, right? We could actually absorb everybody, but here's our delta.
We could
Yeah,
use
I think though, we went through an attendance zone shift, and if you're gonna do something like that, be ready for a lot of community input. So
Well, because
I
when we-
understand what you're saying, so you're
Yeah.
saying catchment area becomes the attendance zone. Those kids are included, so you educate them at the particular elementary school, for example. You're talking about shifting attendance zone boundaries all over the place, if you consider those students the pre-K kids, is that what
You
you're
might
talking
not,
about?
I wasn't interpreting it that.
Yeah, I was
way.
interpreting just like, if you were
How
gonna be
many-
a kindergartner there, you would be a pre-K student there. Like you would just mirror your same catchment area.
wasn't there a
That's-
point that we couldn't fit certain schools with
Right, you would
any
have,
more
you
classes?
would have smaller classes.
You
and
would,
stuff.
okay,
You
yeah, I was
wouldn't
just
fill-
curious if
wouldn't
you guys
fill
had
those
gone through that. I'm
classes
sure you
up
have,
to the
yeah.
minimum in some schools.
Mm.
And you would have too many in others.
Yeah, I wondered if that was the,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's.
okay.
So,
Yeah.
and can you remind me, there's a different start time for pre-K than kindergarten, correct? Or pre-K than the different elementary? I think, and you know, the survey feedback, I think is great. I think I'm really excited to hear. One of the concerns that I hear over and over again is it really doesn't work for families who have multiple kids at the same school. And parents who work. You know, if you have a pre-K kid and a second grader, they have different start times. And, you know, it's the bus thing, they can't take the bus because they're not gonna be there, you have to drop the pre-K kid off. I think it creates a lot of like, you know, I don't know, burden on families. I don't necessarily know what the answer is, but I just hear that feedback from families a lot. And so I'd be interested to see if we get that on the survey. And the other aspect that, you know, I've brought up before is that, and I don't necessarily think we addressed it in this round, is the sibling dynamic in general. And we don't give any sort of considerations to if you do have a second grader at, you know, Red Mill, and now I'm in the lottery, and of course I'm preferencing Red Mill, but I don't get it. I get, you know, DPS, but logistically now I can't do it because I got a, you know, a cart full of other people. And I think that that's also really sad and frustrating for a lot of families. And I know that, you know, we heard feedback on like swapping. They found people went out and found another family that was a 1-for-1 swap. They wanted Red Mill, they wanted DPS, and they both agreed to switch it, but we don't allow that. And I think that it's hard, and I think that's also a point of frustration. And I don't necessarily know, you know, the answers, but have we thought all
I know
about
that,
these
I think
things?
Roy contacted the state last year and asked them a question about siblings, and the answer was that it has to be. You can't necessarily, and I think behind the scenes, we work out so many situations.
Right,
with families.
So we do try to work out as much as we can, but like I said, having an open, kind of, it's your spot to do what you want is extremely challenging if it just becomes a people swapping and, but if people do contact us, we do, as we play through the whole process, I feel as though, you know, we do a good job of clearly trying to get everybody their number one choice and number two choice. I don't think we've had anyone who's had to have gotten like their fourth or fifth choice. It's usually number one, some number two, and very few people get their number number 3. I don't know if we've ever gone beyond that. Gene, you did some of it too. I can't think of the time.
I think there were people who like didn't and then got frustrated and just opted out.
How does the lottery selection work? Like, is it truly randomized or?
Yeah, so when people put in for, is the registration that they want to go into the lottery, they get an email back of a number, your number 2,
Mhm.
3, 4, 5, go on. And then on the second, we're at Janae, and we kind of have all those ping
Oh,
pong
wow.
balls are in there, and they go, and first one picked, number 87. Second one, number 93, and so on.
And to Emily's point, like, so families figured out a swap, could they actually swap or no?
They were told no.
The district
Right, we
doesn't
do
allow,
say-
okay, I
we do
wasn't
say
sure, okay.
So I would wonder, is there a way to institutionally because what I'm hearing is that it's a lot of work, right? Managing pre-K as it is, right? So to me, it sounding like there's just a lot going on, and that, you know, if we as an administration, I don't want to speak for you, right? But my point though is, like, how do we institutionally incorporate, right, some of the feedback about, you know, sibling placement? So I wonder if that could be part of the lottery draw process, that institutionally in the process, we just plug, you know, this preference this way. I just wonder, is there a way to design it, right? It just rolls how it rolls.
Yeah, I can check with the state again in terms of the lottery piece. I guess just kind of thinking through it a little bit. If you have a sibling at Janae, and as a district, if we're saying you have a pre-K student going in, you're guaranteed Janae, ultimately they're not in the lottery anymore. They're just assigned schools, and then the lottery becomes all of the remaining people.
What if it's the lottery up front, but placement is different? So do you have the lottery, the access to pre-K and then the school to get, like, so what I'm trying to say is there a separation between the two, or is it just the one?
So when they fill out the form to enter the lottery, they have their choices ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And it's the
Yeah, but I
choices
think what
of-
Jesse is saying, that it's probably not, the law is probably
Place.
not written that it's place
What school it is,
specific, it's
yeah.
whether you have a spot in a
Yes,
pre-K or
yes.
not.
Yes. You
We
could
put
design
that,
placement.
we did that, we put that on ourselves.
Would it be possible for the district to look at the place,
Yeah,
like
so
look at the
I
sibling
hear-
placements and see if it worked, like if everybody got what
But
they.
shouldn't that be on their first choice? If
Yeah.
it's not, then, right?
Right,
like-
so I'm just
like
saying, why,
everybody-
yeah, why is it?
Yeah,
Why is it
yeah,
that big
yeah,
a
yeah.
deal? Like,
That's a
they
good
might
point.
not
I think the
get
point
it.
You're
is-
talking about separating your preference for location from the lottery itself. So when you do a lottery,
The lottery, it's
you
you
say,
get a
okay, we've
spot.
got X number of slots in the pre-K program. Now we do a lottery, and we say these children are assigned to our pre-K program. And then you look through it through a different process to say, okay,
Now, those people have a lottery for each.
no,
Well, I
you
think the
Right?
difference is,
you
like,
have to come up with some kind of a
So,
process.
You can't just do.
We're not gonna stop this here, but we
No.
come up with
Yeah.
a separate, we come up with a separate process
Yeah.
for sites.
So I just want to throw out there, just kind of thinking about this, that if we heavily weight sibling preference, then we're giving more weight to people who have a second or third child coming in. Whereas if it's
Might
my
not be
first
fair.
or only child, now I'm way down on the priority list for
That's true.
sites.
And not for access to the pre-K, like,
No, but
No,
in terms of
access to
sites.
location.
yes.
So like if I live in Janae district and it's my first child, I maybe end up at DPS because there were so many Janae siblings.
Mhm.
And I have kids at two different schools. I get it's so much more convenient to have them in one place, but I don't want to penalize families
Yeah.
for it being their first or only child coming in. And then also in terms of the swapping, like it seems on its surface, oh, that's easy, but then that penalizes a parent who's new to the district, who doesn't have connections, who doesn't know people, who maybe doesn't speak English to make a swap on social media.
Yeah.
So as unfair as it may be seem to the parents who aren't getting what they would prefer, I think it is consistent at least. And I just want to be sure that we are being consistent. And
So
then-
I don't want anyone to think that any decision that has to do with the difficulty of work, it really is,
Yeah.
like you said, just trying to be as fair as.
Mhm.
Well, the
As
other
we
thing
can.
too is, are we talking a lot about this? And I'd love this to be part of the survey, because maybe we're all
Yeah.
sitting here analyzing
Agree.
this, and it might be one case out of 180. let's talk about that. And we can deal with the one case, or is it like a really big problem that we need to revisit? So I think if we do the survey, this is very important aspect of it.
And I think too, it's like also, it's like the quality too. I know that we've talked about it before. Would love that aspect, you know, from the survey. How did the year go? How was your teacher, lead teacher, assistant teacher, staff, and, you know, administration? I feel like it's a huge blind spot for us. And, you know, I'm sure we can speak perfectly well to, you know, our own host, our own elementary schools, but, I just think we have to make sure the quality, and the care that these pre-K kids are in these other organizations or companies are up to our standard. Because I also feel like, yes, I want the most kids to go to pre-K, but if it's actually an adverse environment, I feel like having the survey will give us a better indication of that. I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see what the survey says. I'm also, you know, ask us to at least reconsider if it's 5 hours and the other ones are 6. Let's have a conversation about that, because that is a good hour of quality time.
The school that's doing the 5 hours is getting the same 5,400 per school as the ones doing it for 6 hours. So they should be doing it for 6 hours. Yeah.
Even if it's just they can run around.
Yeah.
Are you going to know what they're doing?
Last question I have is,
Yeah.
all students must apply even who's currently enrolled in pre-K? Is
Yeah,
that-
it came up because what happens is you might have a child who attends a tutor time. They've been going there 2nd grade, 3rd grade. They just assume
Oh, I
that
see.
when they're now as I say, grade 3, 2-year-old, 3-year-old,
Yep.
they're a 4-year-old, that they're automatically in our UPK,
Got
but
it.
that's
Okay.
not
I was
necessary.
wondering.
Oh, yeah. Repeat.
Are there split rooms or is it just a East Greenbush room?
We do not have split rooms. That is a good question. We don't have
And is
split
that in the contract?
rooms. It is that it's a one, yes, per class. So we don't have split rooms.
I think generally speaking, the survey worked. I think a lot of the problems that, you know, I feel or people have brought up is that it's not consistent. And I think that when I see stuff like that, it's like there's a lot of risk I feel like associated with that. And then there becomes, you know, what you could argue as inequities or burden for families. And so I think conceptually, that's my struggle with how we've approached, you know what I mean? We allow so much, differences between sites.
But I would like to say, we have made great progress in this
Yes.
area, and we really do also need to recognize that. I mean, look back 4 years ago, we didn't have any, right? 4 years ago now?
Yeah.
What is it, 3rd year, 4th year?
Board.
So that's quite impressive. It's been a want and a need for a long time, so.
So just to make sure, so do I hear that the board, would we like to go out with an RFP to see if there are any additional
I don't think
locations?
it's a bad idea. I think it's good. If it's not too much work, I mean,
I think you should pull the last RFP and update it and send it out.
But is there any way to like moving forward, like say how many hours or it's inclusive of lunch or whatever, like is there a way to like start not fixing, but like maybe right sizing or filling position?
So I think we can put the 6-hour piece in the RFP. I don't want to speak for the sites, but
Yeah.
the sites who are doing it for $5,400 a student, I would say having lunch be a requirement.
That's a reduction by the university rate.
You know, like not, they might not be interested, you know, in it for that cost. I guess my last question would just be, is the board, I know we will go out with the RFP, but we are starting to get some questions regarding pre-K. Is the board okay with us putting out tentative sites right now and getting this information out because the February 2nd, February 3rd opening is coming up.
Oh, I definitely feel like people are already looking and wondering like when we're going to refresh. Yep.
Okay, moving on to an update on the governor's executive budget. I'm sure this is you, Mr. Summers.
briefly me and then Jennifer. Okay. So the governor did release her executive budget proposal yesterday. A couple of items that we were looking at, foundation aid being one of them. We're going to let Jen talk about foundation aid and total aid, because it's important to know that while we received the foundation aid increase more than what we anticipated at the last board meeting, it's offset by reductions in expense-driven aids, and we have to have more time to review that. So Jennifer will explain that a little bit. Second issue that the governor included within her budget proposal was that that affects schools is the free lunch, which you'll need to get more details on. And the third is called the distraction-free school environment. And seems to be cheering that on, that schools will have to find a way to ensure that students are not utilizing their cell phones during the school day. And basically what I have read is leave it up to the local school district board to create a policy as to how that would be managed. So they're not expecting everybody to go out and buy the yonder bags. But there is an allocation, I think, associated with helping schools implement this change. I'd like to comment on that a little bit. We have an existing committee that is studying cell phones. I think now the role of the committee shifts a little bit to not whether we're going to do it or not, how we're going to do it, and what the best way to involve stakeholders in the development of procedures will be implemented in the way East Greenbush. So East Greenbush may do things a little differently than Troy is currently doing, or we may do it exactly the same, but I think the role of the committee becomes discussing that management of the new requirement of New York State, should it pass, which I believe it will, to have a distraction-free school setting for all of our students. We may want to go back and revisit procedures at the middle school and see if there's anything we can do to enhance that as well. But those are the three. There's some other proposals in the budget, help families and some other things that don't necessarily directly impact education, but those are the three big ones: foundation aid, the cell phones, and the free lunch. Yeah. I'll turn it over to Jen for the analysis of the state aid budget.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. A couple of things on foundation aid. Just it's like perfect segue from last week's meeting. When we were talking about the whole harmless districts not receiving any aid increase, part of the executive budget proposal is providing a minimum of a 2% increase to those districts. There were a few recommendations from the Rockefeller study that were applied to the foundation aid increases. Overall, it was a 5.8% increase in foundation aid in the executive budget. They are including the census, the state data that we talked about a few weeks ago when we were talking about the federal funding. So that is a component that they're using for poverty data. They also are replacing the free and reduced price lunch data, the economically disadvantaged data with the free and reduced price lunch data. And then there's some sharing ratios that have been updated and changed with that. So what does that mean? So we have access to our state aid runs. There's a worksheet posted. I see everyone has it open. I provided what our 24-25 state aid is. So I wanted to take a look at what this year looks like. What is this year's budget? So that column all the way over to the left is reflecting that district adopted budget for 24-25. We have pretty solid data as to what our actual state aid will be for 24-25. So you can see how those estimates at the time the budget was adopted last spring align with what's actually happening this year and where some differences are. Overall, the budget is was about $74,000 shy of what we're actually receiving of the $37.2 million. So the estimates were pretty close. There were some adjustments in regards to building aid and transportation aid. So there's a few things that swung differently amongst the expense-based aids. So when we look over at the executive budget level, Basically, our foundation aid for 24-25 was $24.69 million. In the executive state budget, that foundation aid is $26.1 million. One of the things that we did, so there's a few, the executive budget is the first step. And so there's still negotiation that has to happen within the legislature. So we won't know if this is the final information until we get to that state budget adoption. So there's still could be changes. The other thing outside of just that negotiation, there are data points within that foundation aid formula that still could change or update. So you'll see to the right in the green section on the right side of the page, what we're looking at right now is what may be the first run of what we'd be including in the 25-26 budget for state aid revenue. So you'll see that that foundation aid revenue is, there's little footnotes over to the right and the bottom, is about $75,000 less than what was in the state budget, executive budget. And that's just to allow for some data fluctuations. We saw that last year as well. So overall, it is from budget to budget, from 24-25, what the district budget was to what we're looking at for district budget 25-26. It is a 5.88% increase, which is about $1.4 billion over last year. So that's just on the foundation. Then we have our expense-based aids, which includes building aid, transportation aid, BOCES aid, and some high-cost aids. Building aid is in pretty good shape. We have a lot of information about our projects that have been filed with the state. And what those debt service schedules look like. Now you see that there's a decrease in that aid. That can be misleading. Okay, so we have the building aid will fluctuate year to year based on projects that have been fully aided or new projects that come on. So basically they're being amortized over a 15-year period. So we have those charts as to how that moves. But with that, with our, when we talked about the tax cap calculation last week, with our new project, we've been talking about maintaining tax neutrality. So what you're going to see in the actual expenditure side of the budget is a reduction in debt service expenditures. So although the revenue has decreased, also has the debt service expenditures. So that will be a neutral impact in the district budget. The next expense-based aid, and just as a footnote too, the building aid, that aid ratio is 72.1% at the present time. The transportation aid, that is a 66.1% aid ratio. We did see a decline. So this aid bucket needs additional review. So back in 23-24, that particular aid line was budgeted at 4.7 million. We had brought that down to 4.4 last year. It's still coming down. And that's not necessarily indicative of how the spending is. It may just be how the approach to budgeting that was. So we just need to look at that and continue to refine it. The one thing that is not included in this number, which is in the executive state budget, is the aid associated with our bus purchases. And the reason for that is that aid is not funding our general fund operations. It's funding our bus purchase reserve. So we want to make sure that we're not capturing that particular aid, to support just the regular general fund programs, or we'd be having a budget deficit for that.
Would be overestimated.
We'd be overestimated, right? So that is a difference between what the executive state budget is and what the district budget is. We're still reviewing that because this particular expense-based aid is based on our spending for 24-25. So we have to really look at and just trend out and understand what our expenses are going to be through the end of this year and make sure it's reasonable and that we're not overstating that. So this is an area where conservatism is important.
I got a brief comment. I just want to say that this year's budget overview, even though it's preliminary, feels different than last year's. I think last year's, right? Like we had a summary of all the other school districts and we were seeing how negative it was considerably. So I'm just saying, like, as we even approach, and I know Mr. Mc is something that McDonald is doing in early February. So I think by then we will have kind of the statewide sentiment, right, of feedback from the schools. But I just wanted to see on the surface, it feels different, right? And we're looking at an increase in foundation aid. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty, with what the governor was going to do. Refining the inflation factor, so taking things that were out of the law.
Right.
It wasn't typical. It was like making adjustments to the formula that weren't even part of the law. So there were a lot of things that were uncertain. With that, it's a very different picture, I guess, at the start.
And I think the two elements that we talked about earlier, using the same data and freedom of use lunch data changes and updating that, I think actually helped us. In terms of the two elements of the Rockefeller study that seem to have been looked at and put into this budget, because that's what I believe.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, there could be a we can't see the data yet behind what's the driving factor for the increase, whether there was just additional money pumped in or like how much of an impact was the data changes versus just additional funding, being put in, but it was a positive impact. I mean, overall it's about a 5.9% increase in foundation aid, which is what statewide it's being seen for foundation aid was 5.8%. So it's right in line with that, on a statewide basis.
And minimum 2% for the districts that were on that sheet that we gave you last week is helpful to those districts, but their expenditures far exceed 2%. So they're still going to have gaps. We're going to have to figure out how to close.
And last time we were talking about a $3.4 million Joe fund spend, like we're expected to go in. I'm just trying to relate. So we're seeing like a $600,000 overall aid projection increase. We was looking at in the prior projection, just as a projected figure, what kind of spend on Joe fund?
That will be information coming at a future
Okay.
time. Yeah, so what we were talking about at the last meeting was what does our spending look like for 24/5 fiscal year? And that spending trend was projecting
Okay.
For this year, that will have an impact on fund balance and how much fund balance to be appropriated.
So that's what was expected for this year. It sounds like with this new information, there's going to be some.
So that doesn't change that.
Yes, gotcha.
So this is identifying what additional revenue would be coming into 25-26 to support 25-26 spending plan.
Okay, so we still have, gotcha. Okay, good.
And then there's that factor as well, because at the moment the fund balance is providing part of that revenue source just to be the savings. So back to transportation. So we're still taking a look at that. When you look at year-to-year district actual 24-25 to 25-26, it's about a 2% increase in need. So that appears to be more aligned with what's actually happening, but we're going to need to review our 24-25 expenditure trends to see if there's any adjustments either upwards or downwards related to that. BOCES aid is, we're aided on a 61.3% is our BOCES aid ratio. There's two factors, one that you don't see on this spreadsheet specifically, but you see that the BOCES aid in the executive budget is at $2.5 million. So that's information that the BOCES feed into, they feed that data in, the district does not. And the BOCES make an assumption that they're going to spend 100% of their budget. With that, what ends up happening is any funds that BOCES does not spend ends up refunded to the districts at the end in the next school year. So we have two components in our budget related to BOCES. One is BOCES aid and the second one is the BOCES refund. That BOCES refund has been budgeted about $250,000, and then the aid is looking to be about $2,175,000. So when you look at it combined, those two components, that's really the measure against the state budget, more than just looking at this. The BOCES spending can fluctuate from year to year. So when we look at that total aid plus that refund and the revenue budget, it's about 2.4 $2,425,202.5 in the executive budget. So, we'll continue to look at that. But depending on BOCES spend and everything, that can fluctuate. So, we feel that that's pretty well aligned. You can see that what was included for 24-25, that there happened to be just a $62,000 surplus related to that on the aid side of the house. And then we have a public high cost excess aid and a private excess cost aid. The Questar 3 stack service helps us with our stacking of our students with disabilities. That information gets refined and will provide us with updated figures based on our stack data and our expenditures, as we go through budget process. So right now, in relation to, actually what the 24-25 budget was in relation to what we're actually receiving, I am keeping at the moment, those revenue aid numbers in line with what our trends were in the prior year budget. So this is one area that we don't want to be too perfect. We don't want to end up being too short, on our revenue estimates. We do want to have situations where we have additional revenue coming in and providing some spaces, a little bit of cushion for any fluctuations that may happen. So at the end of the day, even though the foundation aid has a 5.8% increase, keep in mind that this portion of the budget is not as large of a pie. It's our tax levy that's the larger section of the pie. So right now it looks like it's providing $612 additional $1,000 in state aid going into the 2026 budget.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Next up is regular business and proposed change in policy. First reading of the 6240 investment policy. Mr. Shu, Ms. Morgan.
Yes. So, and this kind of all connects to my meeting report too. So, the finance and audit committee have been very busy over the last couple of months. And one of those areas is we've been talking about investments, making sure we're trying to maximize, how our cash is performing for us. And one of the components was getting an updated investment policy. So 3+1 as well of our attorneys assisted us with this, reviewing it. It is modeled after the state comptroller's policy. It does take into consideration of merging our current policy, which is very, very brief, and the regulation and bringing those together. It did it provided additional scope clarification, just provided some additional information, also allowed some additional permitted investments. Namely being like reciprocal deposit arrangements. And one of the items on here would be designation of depositories. So what happens on an annual basis through the reorganizational meeting is an authorization of depositories. We currently only have one authorized depository. So upon the second reading, there will be another resolution at the next meeting to expand that list of depositories to allow us to be able to do different things outside of KeyBank to try to maximize any additional earnings. So this is the first reading. The red line document is attached here. And if there's any questions, I'll take them.
I think I would enter that as the finance and audit committee did a detailed review of this and gave some guidance for the residents, and we recommended this as well. So we're asking for approval for the first reading.
Ms. O'Brien for the first, Ms. Turner as a second. Everyone's in favor. Everyone's in favor. All right. To approval of programs for resident children with disabilities. No questions or comments. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Gursky first, Ms. O'Brien second. All in favor? Everyone's in favor. Motion passes. Moving on to external auditor RFP. Ms. Mulligan.
So this was the second item that the finance and audit committee was involved with. We had issued every 5 years, though, we have to go out to an RFP for an external auditor. The last time the contract award was for a 3-year period, so we did go out our a little sooner than that 5-year timeline. We went out to RFP, we invited 12 firms and also advertised in the paper. We received 4 proposals back. We reviewed those proposals and recommended 3 finalists to the committee. We held interviews in mid-December, the Finance and Audit Committee. And then upstairs in the business office, we conducted some reference checks. And at the end of the day, because we've been with Bonadio and Company for 25 years, I think this was the 25th year. They have provided great service to the district. But in terms of just auditing, the committee felt it was best to make a change. And, you know, business off myself, Ms. Fritzy and myself agreed that wouldn't be a bad thing to do. Always looking for continuous improvement and opportunities to have a fresh perspective. And, you know, there's been a lot of transition upstairs, so it's probably a good time to, you know, check in on that.
So the why is, why do you want to change?
The why is because we've been with the same firm for such a long period of time.
Sometimes a new set of eyes.
Right, new set of eyes.
Anything else? Sure.
No, I mean, they've been very flexible with us, but they've worked very well with us. It just.
And where are these guys located?
So
NME?
sometimes in an audit, that was like, sometimes in an audit, it's not, you know, an audit is an audit, but it's the quality you might get from comments of the audit or control issues that you might not see, might not be material enough to report, but good to know from a management standpoint. And I think that's what Jennifer was trying to do is like, I think everything's good, but it's nice to get a new set of eyes in there and look and see if there's anything that could be lacking that's not material enough to worry about on an audit, but still important enough to change. And
Who are these guys?
Oh, it's Marvin and Company.
Oh. Me.
yeah, they got a lot of.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
So
I
a
mean, I'm
larger
gonna go there.
regional firm. Yes, okay, I see. Yes.
Why would you want to change this? Unknown.
Not unknown, yeah. And then they also, not that it was the first consideration, but their fees were also the lowest.
I think last time we did the 3-year, we talked about, we were just coming off of COVID and we were like, you know what, way too much. I think there's a lot of
What's going
changes
on?
at that point too. So it was just like, no, maybe we'll push it down a little bit.
I
just
think
like-
we were like understaffed too,
Yeah.
and so we
Yeah.
didn't want to put that on. You know,
Which is why I think we
being-
put it to 3 years.
Yes, I think it was strategic, and we knew that this was gonna happen.
All right, sounds like everybody's good. Great. Yep, motion for the resolution. Ms. Steinbach, the first, and Mr. Bruno, the second. All in favor? Everyone's in favor?
Before I go to committee report, given the time that the board has been here, let's just do a general overview of the committee report. So make a decision. You can read that, and if you have any questions about the committee reports, you can let us know.
Yes, sir. So moving on to, because no taking motions, any old business? Anything, nothing? All right, so consent agenda, is there anything up today?
And can I
Yes.
ask for 3 to be pulled out?
Three to be pulled out. Let's do it. So consent agenda is excluding number 3.
Say C.
See, yes, yes.
The same number? I said
Yes.
letter 3.
Yeah.
Did I say 3? I'm sorry.
You know, I can recognize my line. I'll head back to the-
Sorry.
Somebody.
So,
Sorry.
so excluding agenda item C, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ms. O'Brien is first and Ms. Turner is second. Everyone's in favor? Everyone's in favor. So the consent agenda passed. No agenda today. Any new business, anyone?
No, so
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have to do C.
To see.
C, separate, yes, sorry. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to approve C? Mr. Bruno, a second. Ms. Steinbach, everyone's all in favor? And yeah, is there any abstentions? Ms. Komersky is an abstention. Any noes? No noes. So motion passes. Okay, no addendum, no new business, public forum. Nothing. Board forum, I'm starting on my left, Ms. Van Norton. All right, Ms. Komersky.
I just wanted to, thank all the community and the people that helped put together, the bus garage event this weekend. Heard it was very successful, and a lot of children that participated and vendors and parents. So thank you for that. And it goes to a good cause.
Winter Festival's terrific.
Mr. Beal, anything?
Nope.
Mr. Mann? All right, I want to wish the kids taking Regents exams, the best of luck, and our educators who's working hard to prepare them. We definitely appreciate the efforts. There's a lot of concerts going on in all of the elementary schools. It's really a festive time of the year, so we're definitely wishing everyone in the district the best. Let's turn it.
Winter Fest was great. Spent way too much. But hope to see everybody there next year.
Was it right?
Yeah, I attended just the morning breakfast, so it was great to see the eighth graders participating, and they were really, did a great job, so.
Ms. Phillips? What's that? Ms. Steinbach?
I had a lovely breakfast, as well at Winter Fest. My kid enjoyed music golf, which is really cool. I also just want to, publicly thank, the comms team for the, digest every week. I feel like I actually am looking forward to reading that, and so I think all of the effort there appreciative. I often learn something new, either about staff or a program or some cool event that's happening, and I think that's really great. And so I appreciate that. On that note, I did, was clued into a Be the Change Club, and I just want to publicly state that it seems like a really awesome club, and I've asked for us to be able to see the finished product and possibly do that as a board, which I think would be a great opportunity.
And there's no executive session for this afternoon or evening, I should say. Is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Komersky, a second. Ms. Steinbach, all in favor? Anyone's in favor? I'm here.